I'm originally from New Zealand, so I grew up in a fairly isolated country where media and news often arrived late. When the internet started, it became a critical part of my life, and I became a software and network developer. Since I conveniently also have a degree in music composition, my life took me into developing music technology specifically for the internet. And the last 20 years, I've had quite a lot of fun. I run a software company that helps music studios, orchestras, film studios, actors, and anyone who works with high quality real-time media to collaborate remotely. I've also been researching and teaching on the topic of using the internet and the kinds of tools we have available for media transition for contemporary music practice. So now doing that quite a while, and it's really lovely to be here, share some of my current thinking and where I think future developments might lie. When accepting this invitation, I didn't know what I would talk about. So I thought I'll work backwards from the goal I'm trying to achieve and eliminate some uncertainty there, and maybe I'll end up with more questions than I started with, which I consider a success. So appropriately, given I was told there might be some noise today, I repositioned my mic as close as possible. So it's a helpful example of being able to be adaptable in the face of uncertainty. Uncertainty has a lot of meanings. We can say unsure, undetermined, unpredictable, unreliable, unforeseeable, variable, unfixed, wavering, irregular, incalculable, conjecturable, fitful, constant, and iffy. And it's the opposite of what we seek in our lives. Generally, uncertainty disrupts us, it disturbs us, it interferes with us, it completely throws us into disorder and ruins us and spoils us and causes havoc. This is because uncertainty changes how we think about the future. Certainty is needed to predict future events, so we can apply measurements based on the past. And guess what comes next? And uncertainty arises when we only have partially observable environments in the situations of chaos, in cases of negligence, ignorance, indolence, or laziness, or when we are working with unstable or chaotic systems. So I thought, well, first we'll figure out what the goal is and then work backwards from that goal and eliminate some uncertainty where I can and be adaptable to everywhere else. And so my goal is to present on the topic of designing systems for network music, specifically how to design for uncertainty in those systems. Then I need to predict whether or not this presentation will be any good. That means I need some prior knowledge to work with, what success or failure might look like, and I need a way to measure that success. So how to measure that I've successfully discussed the topic of designing uncertainty in network music? How can I know if this presentation worked? Did I communicate clearly? Did I have a strong and cohesive narrative? Did we bond? Did I bore you? Did I not bore you? Did I learn and did you learn? And did we arrive at some new knowledge together? How could I know that? I'm not there in the same room with you. I'm not going to be a chat after this and, go into those conversations that usually when we're at a symposium together, I would get to have that kind of feedback. So one of the problems of not being there in the same room is I'm missing a lot of information about our interaction. It gives me uncertainty, and I have to make certain decisions and trade-offs to feel like I'm participating in the right way with you. Mostly, I care. Did I arrive at a better understanding of what it means to work together under uncertain conditions, specifically as it applies to being a musician working over the internet? That seems a fair goal, so let's work with that. So the basis of my measuring success is, did I get a response from you? In order to do almost anything human together, we need feedback. So for us to be creative together, we need a reaction. And then you need to respond, and I'll respond, and you'll react, and you'll respond, and so on. And so here we are, a few minutes in, and so far we know to eliminate uncertainty, we need to have a goal. We need to have a feedback, whether that goal was success or failure. And in music, our goal is to be, musical. And what I think a lot about is how can we be musical over the internet? We could have an entire conversation on what the goal of music is, but at least let's define here today, the goal is being musical together while apart. So we seek feedback when we're playing together in an ensemble, a lot like what Atal was talking about. And am I in tune? Am I expressive? Did we shape time together in a meaningful way? In music, we're constantly having input by the way of sound, by the way of looking at each other. When we're playing together in an ensemble, we're able to predict what happens next with that sound, so we know where to go. We feel we are in flow together, and that creates our sense of meaningfulness and togetherness when we're performing together. And so when we're playing music together, especially when it's the kind of music we're all familiar with, we can easily get into that experience of flow, which is so important for playing music together. We have tacit knowledge of the music language. There's a predictability of what will happen next. With every signal that arrives to us, whether it's music or sports or conversation or any real-time input at all, predictions are happening in our physical body and our brain and by the cognitive mind. Neurologically, we're always predicting because the brain is always delaying and syncing up incoming signals for us to process. Our senses are not arriving at the same time. Visuals take a lot longer to reach our cognitive brain than audio. And the brain knows that, so it delays everything until sync happens. And then it lets us experience it cognitively. Once I learned this was about a couple of years ago, I was working with a neurologist in the Netherlands. I was blown away. We're actually always living in the past. The brain is always predicting where all things will be, and we're just a little bit behind of reality. Imagine I'm throwing a ball to you, and even though that cognition is delayed, so your brain predicts what it's seeing, and you can catch that ball. Even though you're actually not seeing that ball coming, your brain tells you, hey, there's a ball coming, you better put your hands out and catch it. So we're quite a few milliseconds in the past, and you can't, you're living in the past and strategizing about the present as well as the future. It's absolutely fascinating. I do encourage you to read up about what's new in neurology in regards to prediction in the brain. As in music, we're also always predicting, because in reality, we have many incoming signals coming from different sources. I think I mixed it. And our brain has to synchronize that, because music is one of those types of signals that only makes sense if you have previous information. So you need cognitive time to process for what you're hearing right now. And how we compensate for musicians already, our brain has special expertise to manage latency and synchronize all of those signals. So latency is unavoidable and happening all the time anyway. There's latency when you're talking to a friend, even right in front of you. There's natural latency as sound propagates through the air. It's not instant. It needs to get converted into physical sound from your friend's brain in cognition, and then that needs to be pushed into the air through the body. Those airways need to travel to you, and your physical ear needs to receive them. The airwaves then get converted by the auditory nerve into electronic signals, which is actually one of the fastest parts, and then sent to your brain for you to convert to language, synced up with the visual signal so you can experience perfect link sync. None of it's instantaneous, and none of us notices, because it's been that way for us since birth. Humans have evolved for this. We're completely adapted to it. Studies have actually shown that deaf persons have faster responses to visual stimuli than hearing persons, because they're not having to slow things down and worry about synchronization. So in music, we're also managing delays that get really big when we need to adapt strategic support to musicians. For example, an orchestra, a big, huge space with big instruments. It takes a lot of time for sound to travel. Without the conductor, those instrument performers on each side of the stage would just not be able to play and sync together. And of course, imagining a pipe organ, organists play to learn with that delay. They hear the sound that they play quite a lot later than after they play it, and it just becomes something normal to them. They adapt to it. For example, percussion, if large bands on an arena, they will put percussion together in clusters so that the musicians around them can focus to that and not worry about hearing percussion too way behind. And in large signals, if you ever went to a big stadium, and wherever you are, you're not hearing the monitors from far away from you, because the sound engineers have done a really good job. They know their physics, and they make sure that you're just listening to the monitors really close to you. They manage all of the volumes and the levels, and of course they make sure the performers on the stage are only monitoring themselves. They're not hearing the sound that's out there, because you know how big those delays are. And some of these strategies can also be applied to make new creative outcomes. For example, we can play with localization tricks and actually even trick the air to thinking signals are coming from one place when they're coming from another, giving us inventions such as Doppler effects, Dolby Atmos, which only uses a few speakers to trick us into thinking there's speakers when actually there's just nothing, it's just thin air. So we can predict and we can delay signals. So we can synchronize signals that arrive late from each other. And we can strategize according to our knowledge of those signals and our knowledge of the physical world. Our ability to adapt to late signals is what makes it so interesting when we come to the topic of network music, which requires a lot of adapting. So network music is effectively characterized by 4 parameters. We've got the network, and on the network then we have latency, unavoidable, and packet loss. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more. And then we have the musical parameters of harmony and rhythm. And then we have the 4th parameter of space, where that music is heard, the acoustics, in which the music is created. And network music messes with all of those characteristics. It disrupts harmony and rhythm. So if you have latency, you're going to have signals that are arriving late from each other, and suddenly the brain just can't synchronize those signals, and it's no longer in harmony. Packet loss means we miss messages, maybe important ones. Microphones and compressions and playback technology disrupts acoustics. Localization disrupts our ability to place musicians in the space where they are. Seeing each other over camera instead of our full 3-dimensional experience changes our natural ways of getting visual feedback from each other. And without good feedback, we can easily get lost. And syncing video, of course, on the network adds even more delay because the video takes longer to compress and transmit. So if we're using video in network music, you either accept things out of sync or you delay the video even further. In addition to all this, most of what happens around us isn't entirely predictable. So unpredictable, sorry. So a lot of the signals you're getting in from your brain right now are not new. Your brain knows what the room around you looks like. It knows what's going on next to you. When there's no movement, your brain just says, nothing happened. I'm not going to input this. I'm just going to keep outputting what I already know so I can speed things up. And the brain is lazy. If it doesn't have to process, it won't. And so a lot of what you're actually thinking is reality. Your brain just told you this is pretty sure what's happening. I think that's really fascinating that we're just bypassing reality until the brain thinks it's necessary. And so some of the data that you're processing is completely imaginary. And when information around us isn't very reliable, or has a lot less information, what we're used to, it makes it harder to predict. And so the brain has to work harder or differently. It's one of the reasons why it's so refreshing and new to go to a new place, because then you get exhausted because, you spend all day looking at all these new things, processing this new information. If you want to relax, go to your house and be somewhere that you know very, very well, and your brain can have proper rest. So our brain, given our brain manages latency and synchronization by guessing what's happening or coming next, using prediction where it can. Those predictive abilities of the brain require and expect a certain threshold of delay between those signals and a threshold of predictability. So when we aren't getting information fast enough or it's not reliable enough, it means we slow down. And as musicians, it means we completely drop out of flow. So, for example, when playing in an ensemble, we expect those signals to arrive with us. The threshold is thought to be around 30 milliseconds. Some say 9, but it depends on the signal. So between 9 and 30 milliseconds. That's how an orchestra or an ensemble sounds cohesive, even if they're, quite opposite sides of the room. As long as they arrive within a certain time, your brain's able to merge those into being harmonic and rhythmically intact. And or vertically synchronized. And even though it's multiple instruments coming from different locations, different timbres and sound levels, those conditions work to make what we experience as being cohesive music. But once we get to network music, all of that is disruptive because we have the internet traveling at the speed of light. And so when it's traveling over fiber, it's actually not traveling at the speed of light. It's about half the speed of light because fiber is not a vacuum. So we cannot send music from one location to another instantaneously. You're going to get, 10 to 20 milliseconds per 1,000 kilometers. And then there's all the software, hardware processing needed to get music into packets so it can travel, moving all those packets around between routers and switches. Only with dedicated hardware and near distances can we effectively play together the same way we might experience it while being in the same physical space. And any further than that latency, and the brain can no longer make accurate predictions, and we lose that experience of synchronization. And further, the internet is not perfect. It's always losing pieces of data, what we call packet loss. So the key feature of the modern day internet is that it's packet based. We break up our messages and send tiny pieces over a gigantic, vast network where each piece or packet may take a different route than the last one. It's unpredictable. And because it's unpredictable, well, we need to add latency. Can we wait for them all to arrive? Or maybe we need to wait, send a message saying, hey, I didn't get this. Can you send it back? And that adds more latency. And so latency is unavoidable and it's unpredictable. That's the key feature of network music, but it's not so unpredictable we can't adapt, and the latency is not so high that we can't adapt. One of the other concerns we have, of course, the acoustics. We've got compression, which is amazing these days, and even possible, for example, with jack trip. If you've got good enough internet, you can send uncompressed audio. But acoustic feedback is a really destructive force. So right now you're hearing me with a bit of noise compression. If we had a conversation on the internet, you're probably going to have noise cancellation, echo cancellation. So maybe instead we ask all musicians to wear headphones, which you know not everyone likes. I'll keep a distance from the monitors. So acoustics is really tricky with network music. And we can't distinguish which signals are important when they come from the exact same source. We lose the ability to localize, to better determine what the source of audio is. And on top of that, there's how we communicate as humans. So how we trust that I can respond, and how I know for sure that you're going to receive that response with the full information package that I want you to have. So how can I know that we're present with each other? Because network music disrupts how we localize, the authenticity with which we hear each other. It disrupts the usual ways we trust each other, and the method by which we communicate is mediated, which means we have a process between us instead of direct communication. In this case, we are mediated by the digital network, and it changes how we see each other. So Atau also mentioned trust, how we engage with each other under network music conditions. To understand how being remote from each other disrupts trust, we can use Professor Caroline Navion's UTPA trust model, which is UTPA is you being in unity with time, place, and action. She states that technology interferes in our presence on all levels because it has changed our perception of the dimension of time as well as the dimension of place. These different dimensions have different values according to the situation at hand. So here's a UTPA model, U in unity of time, place, and action. And so this provides a conscious description of time, space, action, and you in the configuration of a certain product or process in which presence, mediated presence, and witness presence all play a role, and where the word unity refers to a specific set of relationships between those four dimensions that is designed within the process, and that what makes certain interactions possible. And in the context of network music, we can describe how network digital mediation affects those dimensions. So you have the dimension of you, not you. So, for example, I am small and pixelated to you, and rather than a full person. To me, you are a flat stream of images I recognize as faces. I know a couple of you, the rest of you I don't, so I need to work harder to know you're paying attention. We're having a real-time relationship, and when we're performing music together, because you're not representing to me in the way that I'm used to having humans represented, I need additional information. The way I identify who might be playing an instrument is disrupted. And how we manage being in the same location or not. And this provides a context that's ethical. This guy's an ethical dimension. So as a musician, do I have the right to act? I could cause harm or benefit when we share a space. I could walk over, take your instrument and smash it. I have that ability. Obviously, there's the ethical questions. Or maybe just your microphone's too loud and we're remote. I can't go over the internet and change your microphone. Maybe your instrument needs tuning and I can't help you. So it affects our sensory feedback of each other. We transmit each other in pixels and packets, and we're losing tons of information. And so we need to find ways of transmitting additional information to make up for it. We use special gestures and words. And now that refers to a shared period of attention and action. How can we react on each other? And the question is, does network latency disrupt that? Or can we still use real-time strategies? I think so. We've been communicating over video and network conferencing for years, and in general, we have no problem talking to each other. It's just when music comes into play, our musical sensitivity is so high that the added latency makes it feel like we're on separate timelines. And the kinds of music we play together and the strategies we can find can help with that. And I understand we'll hear more from George coming next. But what about when the latency gets really high? Maybe when we're on Mars. We could act at the same time, but we're so far apart we wouldn't know it. Latency there can be as high as 20 minutes between Earth and Mars. Mars has an elliptical orbit. Sometimes it's 3 minutes latency, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it goes behind the sun and we'd lose contact completely. So that's a really interesting question. What does now mean when we're that far apart? And do or not do, the possibility to act or not act as a result of social interaction. To be able to act requires information. We need to be able to read the faces and intentions of each other so we can act accordingly and ethically to each other. The network disrupts by way of time and place. How can we know exactly how you're planning to act when I'm missing the ability to react as quickly as I'm used to reacting? So again, we need to add new information. And music, this is great. We have scores. We have predefined structures. We're really good at structuring time together. So I think we can just build on that and adapt to the situation. In all situations, we adapt. We make trade-offs. And we can apply this UTPA framework to any situation. It can help us understand where, as humans, we have agency or not. We can find out what's missing in order to communicate better. And we can add new information to transmit to each other. So in order to make better trade-offs, we need information. We need what I call vital information. And by that, information that's critical to the situation. A music score is full of vital information. The time signature, the tempo, the harmonic scale, rhythmic structure, dynamics, the musical form. As musicians, we learn to read the same language, so we can pick up a score and play together. It contains that vital information. Maybe it contains even more. As music got more prescribed towards a romantic area, composers practically stuffed their scores of information about expression and how to exactly reproduce their ideas. And that information traveled across time, across decades, and even more, now more than 150 years later, we can play Chopin fairly accurately to how he might have played it. He gave us that information. So we do the same when we work remotely and we want to have a good experience. We can share the information we need so we can stay in sync, stay in tune with each other and reach musical flow. So under uncertain conditions, under uncertainty, we strategize. We strategize when faced with uncertainty. We have sensory and physical strategies. We know that we have neurological latencies. Maybe future humans, will have such a networked existence. Maybe we'll adapt to these longer latencies. We can develop new technologies. There's lots of machine learning tools that'll get developed culturally. There's lots of structures you can make into music. I've designed some personal approaches I use in my music composition. For example, working with vertical harmony, using machine learning to synchronize musicians remotely. And like at our show, we can play with the delay. I worked with this project with 3 musicians between a tabla player in London, a contemporary improvisation pianist in Rotterdam, and a Ghanaian funk player with the guitar in Lisbon. And at the beginning, they were completely confused. We said, okay, you guys are going to get together and learn, just make an album. It'll be amazing. And we gave them a few sessions together. At the beginning, they were just like, that guy can't play music. He sucks. They were just, even out of time, didn't get it. And so once we sat down and explained, like, this is just the situation, they found a way to make it work. And not only did they make like an amazing album that we'll work on releasing, they became really, really good friends. They made it work. And and we have, of course, the vital information to send feedback. Because we've already learned and adapted. We've got coping strategies already. We've got really good dedicated tools and hardware if we want to. Machine learning can replace packet loss. And we've got musical adaptations we can make. We can send lots of information. We can send it as code. We can send it as rules. We can send it as instructions. And we can develop these systems that really work for us. And as I mentioned, what about the future when we're colonizing all around the universe? How do we stay in sync on those large distances? Can we apply those tools? And how important will machines be in the future of music? I'm really interested in the question of how do we stay human together over these long distances. So just in summary, everything is already out of sync already. Your brain just does such a good job of letting you know, of letting you think that it's not. And so we're always managing latency as musicians. That's a lot of down to our training as well as our cognitive and neurological processes. And yeah, we're just constantly adapting and developing strategies. So thank you so much.